This is Detective Emma Rodriguez. 30 minutes ago, I arrested my own father in front of 500 guests at the biggest celebration of his career. He collapsed on the ballroom floor, crying like a child. And me? I felt strangely satisfied. The sound of handcuffs clicking onto wrists that once belonged to the man I called Dad for 34 years. That cold, metallic sound was sweeter than any apology he could ever offer. But to understand why that moment felt so sweet, I have to start from the beginning. About how a domestic violence expert became completely blind to living with an abuser herself. 15 hours earlier, I was sitting in my office at Miami Police Department. On my desk was case file number 847 for domestic violence. Suspect, Marcus Thompson, 32, accountant. Victim, his wife, Sarah. Marcus had told Sarah she was clumsy, and that's why her face was bruised. A familiar lie. I'd heard it hundreds of times. And I knew exactly how to break through that deception. But I didn't know that in a few hours I'd hear those same words from my own mother's mouth. 8 years old, I fell off my bike in front of our house. My knee was bleeding, tears streaming down my face. I ran inside looking for comfort. Dad was sitting, reading the newspaper, hot coffee steaming beside him. When he saw me crying, he folded the paper down with that dry, rustling sound. Cold eyes swept over my wound, then stopped at my tear-stained face. "Boys don't cry," he said, his voice steady as a weather report. "But I'm a girl, Dad," I sobbed. 3 seconds of silence. 3 seconds that felt like 3 centuries. Then, well, Mexican girls have to be twice as strong. Go clean that wound, and be more careful next time. No bandages, no kiss on the forehead, no "Daddy will help you." Just the first lesson. Pain is something you handle alone. But that was just the beginning of learning how to become invisible in my own home. 16 years old, I brought home an application. Not for business school like Dad expected, it was for police academy prep courses. Dad was carving steak at the dinner table, the knife hitting the meat with rhythmic precision. When he saw the form, his hand froze midair. Police? His voice sounded like he couldn't trust his own eyes. "Yes, Dad. I want to help people, protect those who can't protect themselves." He laughed, not a happy laugh. It was a dismissive, cold laugh, like the sound of the knife cutting meat. "Police need authority, Emma. A mixed girl like you, how would you earn respect?" That night, I lay listening to my parents arguing through the thin wall. Mom's voice small as a whisper. "Emma muy inteligente, Frank. She's very smart." "Smart isn't enough, Maria. You need respect." "And a Mexican girl as a cop? Who's going to listen to her?" That sound, the disappointment in Dad's voice, the helplessness in Mom's, it ate away at my soul night after night. But I didn't know that the most criminal sound I was about to hear wouldn't come from the criminals I'd arrest. Police Academy graduation day, first in my class. The weight of my service weapon on my hip, badge gleaming on my chest. A lifetime dream finally realized. I scanned the auditorium looking for familiar faces. 500 people stood applauding, but the person I most wanted to see was absent. A text came just as I received my diploma. "Congratulations. Hope you know what you're doing." Dad, no, proud of you. No, you overcame the odds. Just doubt, hesitation, disappointment wrapped in 20 words. Mom sat alone in the front row, clapping enthusiastically with tears in her eyes. When I walked down, she hugged me tight and whispered in Spanish, "Mija, Mama muy orgullosa." Mom is so proud, but one person's pride couldn't fill the void left by another's absence. Especially when that person was the man I'd spent my whole life trying to prove myself worthy to. I swore from that day I'd become someone no one could look down on, including my father. But 12 years later, I realized that while I was hunting other abusers, I'd overlooked one right in my own home. 12 years after graduation, I'd become the nightmare of domestic abusers in Miami. Detective Emma Rodriguez, a name that made opposing lawyers tremble and gave victims hope. 847 cases, 92% conviction rate. I knew every trick they used, how they manipulated victims' psychology, how they isolated them from family and friends, how they used money like invisible chains. I taught young officers to recognize the signs: financial control, unexplained injuries, isolation from support systems, making excuses for their abuser. In training sessions, I always emphasize the first slide. Domestic violence doesn't discriminate by class, profession, or background. It can happen to anyone. I said that hundreds of times, believed it completely, taught it like gospel truth. But I never looked in the mirror. Because the daughter who'd spent her whole life running from her father's disappointment never recognized that her mother was living in fear of an abuser. And the man I wanted to prove my strength to was the one making the woman I loved most tremble every time she heard keys in the door. Until one phone call changed everything. The phone rang at 3:22 in the afternoon. I was sitting in my office, Marcus Thompson's file still open in front of me. Unknown number, Miami area code. I usually don't answer calls like that, but something made me press the green button. Detective Rodriguez? An elderly woman's voice with a slight German accent. Yes, speaking. This is Mrs. Peterson, your mother, Maria Rodriguez's neighbor. Can you come check on your mother? She fell down the stairs this morning. My heart skipped a beat. Mom. Fell down the stairs. 3 words that sounded strangely familiar. Fell down the stairs? I repeated, my voice sounding like it belonged to another detective. My mother was never clumsy. Well, but lately she says she's fine, but Mrs. Peterson paused. You should come see her. The hesitation in her voice, the reluctance to speak directly, it sounded exactly like my witnesses. People who know the truth but are afraid to say it. I didn't know that my professional expertise was about to become a weapon against my own family. 20 minutes later, I parked in front of my childhood home. The 2-story yellow house, palm trees in front of the porch, flamingo-shaped mailbox. Everything looked the same as in my memories, except for one detail. No laughter coming from the kitchen. The key still fit. I opened the door and familiar smells hit me. Corn flour for tortillas, downy fabric softener, and another smell. Medicine smell. Arnica gel. A smell I recognized from hundreds of domestic violence crime scenes. Mommy? I called. I'm home. Slow sounds from the kitchen. Careful footsteps, like walking on thin ice. Then the sound of running water in the sink. Steady. Too steady to be natural. Mom appeared at the kitchen doorway, dish towels still wet in her hands. Wide smile, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Never reaches the eyes when someone's hiding something. Mija, you came to visit Mom? Mom's voice was higher than usual, high and careful. When Mom turned her face toward the light from the window, I saw clearly. Left side facial swelling, discoloration around the cheekbone, defensive posturing, left hand partially covering part of her face. Professional assessment mode kicked in automatically. Blunt force trauma, recent, within 24 to 48 hours. Pattern consistent with backhand strike. I wasn't a daughter visiting her mother anymore. I was Detective Rodriguez, evaluating a crime scene. What happened to Mom? I pointed to her cheek, trying to keep my voice calm. Mom fell down the stairs this morning, Mija. Mom was too careless. A prepared answer, repeating Mrs. Peterson's words. Textbook response of an abuse victim. Mom fell down the stairs? I moved closer, detective eyes scanning details. How did you fall? Mom avoided eye contact. Hand instinctively touched the bruised area, then dropped quickly. Mom missed a step. You know Mom's eyesight is getting worse. Bullshit. Complete bullshit. Stair falls typically cause injuries to knees, wrists, or back of head from trying to catch yourself. Facial injuries from stairs show linear abrasions, not the concentrated bruising pattern I was seeing. Where's Dad? Pause. A microsecond of hesitation. Dad's on a business trip. Meeting with clients about a new project. Business trip where? Another pause. Marina, meeting with clients about a new project. Marina. Funny word choice. Not hotel, meeting room, or office. Marina. I looked around the kitchen, clean, organized as always. But there was a subtle wrongness. Dish towel folded too perfectly. Coffee cup rinsed but sitting alone. Mom never drinks coffee alone. Bills on the counter all facing the same direction, like someone had straightened them after stress cleaning. And then I saw it. Small thing, but trained eyes pick up everything. Broken stem on the little ceramic rooster beside the window. Fresh break. Ceramic pieces swept up carefully but missed one tiny shard under the stove. The moment the pieces clicked together in my head was the moment I realized. My mother wasn't a neighbor seeking help, or a stranger reporting abuse. My mother was a victim. And I'd been missing this for 12 years. Mom, I said, my voice no longer professional. Can you tell me what really happened? Mom stiffened. Shoulders pulled in, protective posture. Nothing happened, Mija. Mom told you. Mom fell down the stairs. Mom didn't fall down the stairs. Silence hung between us like smoke. Heavy. Choking. Mija. Mom's voice broke slightly. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I stepped closer, detective training kicking in completely. I understand that Mom is protecting someone. I understand that Mom is scared. And I understand that the person who did this to Mom is someone Mom thinks I won't believe. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Mija, you have a good job, good life. You don't need to worry about these things. These things? Heat rose in my chest. Mom is talking like this is normal. It's not always like this. Only when Dad is stressed about work. When projects don't go well. Mom knows how to not make him more upset. Those words, know how to not make him upset, hit me like a physical blow. Those were exactly the words I'd heard from hundreds of victims. The victim blaming themselves, taking responsibility for the abuser's actions. Standing in my childhood home's kitchen, looking at Mom's bruised face, listening to excuses I could recite in my sleep. That was the moment my profession collided with the personal in the most devastating way possible. I'd become an expert at recognizing abuse, but somehow missed it happening to the person I love most. "Mom," I said, my voice suddenly very calm, very controlled. "I need Mom to listen to me carefully. I'm a detective specializing in domestic violence. I've investigated hundreds of cases like this, and I'm telling Mom, this stops now." Mom backed away. "You don't understand. Our family, it's complicated. Dad provides for us. Dad works hard. Sometimes people who work hard get stressed and hit their wives?" I interrupted. "Mom, listen to yourself. Mom is making excuses for someone who hurt you. Dad didn't mean to." "Stop." I held up my hand. "Please stop defending him." Silence again. This time, longer, heavier. Then something shifted inside me. The part of me that was a daughter, confused, hurt, desperate to understand, stepped aside. And Detective Emma Rodriguez stepped forward. "Mom, I'm going to ask once. Did Dad hit you?" Long pause. Mom looked down at her hands. "Sometimes. When he drinks, when work is bad. But mija, he's a good man mostly. He just—" "No," I cut her off. "There's no but. There's no justification. There's no excuse." I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. Professional mode completely activated. "I need documentation, photos of injuries, timeline of incidents, financial records, medical visits, everything." "Mija, you can't. This is family business. This is criminal business, and family or not, I'm going to stop it." The decision crystallized in my mind like ice forming on a window. Clear, sharp, unbreakable. I wasn't just Emma Rodriguez's daughter anymore. I was Detective Rodriguez, and I had a case to build. Against my own father. "Mom, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Mom looked at me with eyes full of fear, hope, and resignation mixed together. "Sí, mija. Mom trusts you." "Good. First, we document the injuries. Then we gather evidence. Financial records, medical records, anything that shows a pattern. And most importantly, we do this safely." "What about Dad?" "Dad will face the consequences of his actions. But first priority is keeping Mom safe." I looked around the kitchen once more, this time not seeing my childhood home, seeing a crime scene. Evidence. Timeline. Professional Emma was planning a methodical investigation. But personal Emma? Personal Emma was planning something much more satisfying. Because the person who taught me about respect, about strength, about never backing down from a fight, that person had been using those lessons to terrorize the woman I love most. And that person was about to learn that his daughter had become very, very good at her job. The phone call from Mrs. Peterson had changed everything. But the real change was just beginning. I left Mom's house at 6 p.m. with a folder full of bruise photos and a promise. I'll handle this. Not as an angry daughter, as Detective Emma Rodriguez, with 847 successful cases behind me. Back at my apartment, I cleared the dining table and spread everything out like a war room. Laptop, printer, A4 paper, and the small whiteboard I used for complex cases. At the top of the board, I wrote 3 words in red marker. Frank Morrison, suspect. For the first time in my life, my father's name appeared on my suspect list. I opened my laptop, created a new Excel file. Title: Morrison Domestic Violence Investigation, case number 848. And I began doing what I'd done hundreds of times, except this time it was personal enough to be painful. But painful doesn't mean unprofessional, and Frank Morrison was about to learn that his daughter had become very, very good at this. The smell of black coffee and laser printer ink mixed in my apartment air. This was the smell of justice being prepared. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Emergency family situation, I told my boss. Not a lie. This wasn't rest. This was a full-time investigation. Step 1. Medical records. I took Mom to our family doctor, Dr. Patricia Reyes, the Latina woman who'd cared for our family for 15 years. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and underlying fear. Dr. Reyes, I need full documentation of my mother's current injuries, and I need to review her medical history for the past 5 years. Dr. Reyes looked at me over her reading glasses. She knew I was a cop, and she understood why I was here. Her eyes held sympathy and a bit of shame. Emma, there have been visits where your mother came with unexplained bruises. I documented them, but she always said they were accidents. I opened my notebook, Parker pen pressed deep into the white page. I need dates, photos, descriptions, everything. When Dr. Reyes handed me the medical file thick as a book, my heart felt like molten lead had been poured into it. 13 visits in 2 years. 13 times my mother had come here with injuries, and 13 times I had no idea. March 15th, 2024. Facial bruising consistent with blunt force trauma. March 22nd, 2024. Wrist sprain, defensive type injury. April 8th, 2024. Rib bruising, claimed she ran into the kitchen counter. The pattern was clear as daylight. Increasing frequency, escalating severity. Classic domestic violence progression straight out of the textbook. But what I found in the next 4 days of investigation would be far more devastating. With Mom's consent, I accessed the joint bank accounts. Sitting in my home office, surrounded by printouts and coffee cups, I analyzed transaction patterns like a forensic accountant. Financial control, clear as crystal. Mom had a checking account with exactly $500 deposited weekly. No more, no less. All major purchases had to go through Frank's account. Credit cards were in his name. Mom was just an authorized user with limits. But more interesting were Frank's expenses. Marina fees, $2,000 monthly for a slip at Miami Beach Marina. Hotel charges, Intercontinental, 4 Seasons, all for one person. Restaurant bills, dinner for 2, expensive places, dates that didn't match declared business trips. And then I found them. Regular transfers to an account named Lisa Martinez. $1,500 monthly, regular as clockwork. I screenshot everything. Printing copies, created spreadsheets. This was evidence of a pattern, not just abuse, but adultery and financial manipulation. But I needed more than that. I needed to meet Lisa Martinez face to face. The sound of the laser printer cutting through the night silence like a countdown to Judgment Day. Lisa Martinez, 26 years old, dental hygienist, living in Aventura. I found her address from public records and followed her for a day to understand her routine. Not stalking. This was surveillance for investigative purposes. I approached her at the Starbucks on Biscayne Boulevard while she sat alone with her laptop and iced coffee. Professional approach, non-confrontational. Miss Martinez? I showed my badge and sat down before she could object. I'm Detective Rodriguez, Miami Police Department. I need to talk to you about Frank Morrison. Her face went from confusion to recognition to panic in 3 seconds. I don't know what I did wrong.
You didn't do anything wrong, Ms. Martinez. But I think you can help me with an investigation.
I placed a photo of Mom with her bruised face on the table. The smell of roasted coffee mixed with Lisa's perfume and the scent of newly born fear. This is Maria Rodriguez Morrison, Frank Morrison's wife. And this is the result of her relationship with him. Lisa stared at the photo, coffee cup trembling in her hands. Oh my God. I didn't know. He told me he was divorced. He lied, Ms. Martinez. Frank Morrison has been married for 26 years, and he's been physically and financially abusing his wife for years. I swear to God, I didn't know he was still married. He said his ex-wife was crazy, that she was trying to take all his assets in the divorce. Classic abuser lies. I'd heard these variations hundreds of times. Ms. Martinez, I'm not here to judge you, but I need you to cooperate with this investigation. He's hurting an innocent woman, and I think deep down you know something wasn't right. Lisa broke down crying. Between the tears, she told me everything. Weekend yacht trips, expensive dinners, business trips that seemed too frequent. How Frank never let her come to his house, never met any family or friends. Sometimes he'd get angry about small things. Never hit me, but he had a temper. Sometimes he scared me. Would you be willing to testify about these things? A long pause, then a determined nod. Yes. If he's hurting his wife, yes. Allie secured, witness obtained, and most importantly, Lisa agreed to help with the final phase of the plan. Back at headquarters, I stood before the whiteboard with colored markers like a strategist planning a campaign. This wasn't just a simple domestic violence case. This was about taking down a man who thought he was untouchable. Option 1. Quiet arrest. Professional, private, minimal consequences. Option 2. Public exposure. Maximum impact, maximum humiliation. I thought about all the years he made me feel small. About all the times he dismissed my achievements. About my mother, spending decades walking on eggshells in her own home. Option 2. But to do that effectively, I needed perfect timing and the perfect venue. And then I remembered. Frank's company celebration. Signing the big contract with the city of Miami for the development project. 500 guests, Miami's elite, local media coverage. The perfect stage for a public reckoning. I called Detective Johnson and Officer Martinez, the colleagues I trusted most. I need backup for a domestic violence arrest, but it's going to be complicated. Complicated how, Rodriguez? The suspect is my father. Silence on the phone. Then Johnson said, "When and where?" No questions about conflict of interest. No concerns about procedure. Just support. This is what real family looks like. People who show up when showing up is dangerous. 3 days before the event, I did something I'd never done in my career. I polished my dress uniform. Not for celebration, but for battle. In the military, we have a saying, dress for the war you want, not the war you're in. Tonight, I wanted to fight for honor, dignity, justice. so I would dress like the embodiment of everything he'd ever said I wasn't worthy of. I arranged with venue security to ensure access, coordinated with Lisa so she'd be there, not as an accomplice, but as a witness, ready to tell the truth. I prepared evidence folders, made sure backup officers knew the exact timing. And most importantly, I prepared Mom. Mija, are you sure about this? This will be public. Everyone will know. Mom has been hiding in the shadows long enough. It's time to step into the light. But what if Dad gets angrier? Dad won't have the chance to get angry anymore, Mom. After tonight, Dad will be in jail. The night before the operation, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at the reflection of a woman who'd grown up trying to prove herself worthy of her father's respect. Tomorrow, I would prove something completely different. I would prove that the daughter he once looked down on had become someone strong enough to hold him accountable. Frank Morrison had taught me about authority and respect. Tomorrow, he would learn that real authority doesn't come from fear. It comes from standing up to protect those who can't protect themselves, even when the person you're protecting is your mother, even when the person you're confronting is your own father. The war had been planned. Allies had been gathered. Evidence was ready. Now it was time to execute, and Frank Morrison was about to learn the final lesson about who was really in control of this game. Intercontinental Hotel at 8 p.m. was like a world unto itself. The scent of white lilies mixed with expensive cologne, jazz piano from the corner of the ballroom, chandelier light casting down on 500 faces of Miami's finest. This wasn't just a celebration. This was the perfect stage for Frank Morrison's final performance. I stood by the entrance, uniform heavy on my shoulders. Not to show off, to remind everyone in this room who I was. Detective Emma Rodriguez, expert at catching people who thought they were untouchable. Frank stood center stage like he owned the world. Navy blazer, gold cufflinks, Florida Business Council pin shining on his lapel. Mom beside him, black cocktail dress hiding the bruises, makeup covering facial swelling. That practiced smile of a politician's wife. I knew that smile. I'd seen it on hundreds of victims. 8:15, I walked in. Heads turned. Whispers started. Full dress uniform at a business event wasn't normal, but nothing about tonight would be normal. Emma, darling, the mayor's wife approached first. How distinguished you look. Frank must be so proud of his detective daughter. Frank's eyes found mine across the room. His smile tightened. Mom's champagne glass trembled slightly in her hand. I approached slowly, deliberately, eyes scanning the room like a security assessment. Detective Johnson at the bar, as planned. Officer Martinez near the back exit. Lisa Martinez at table 12, nervous but present. Congratulations, Dad, I said when I reached him. Voice perfectly level, professional. Big contract with the city. Must feel good to be so successful. Thank you, Princess. The word princess carried that familiar condescension. Though I'm surprised you chose to wear your work clothes. This is a celebration, not a crime scene. First jab landed, public undermining in front of his peers. Actually, Dad, I think the uniform is very appropriate tonight because I am here in a professional capacity. I let those words hang in the air. Domestic violence detective, 847 successful cases. Several nearby guests looked interested. Frank's jaw tightened. Emma, sweetheart, tonight isn't about your job. It's about family celebration and, yes, family. I stepped closer. I've learned so much about family lately. About what happens behind closed doors. about control, about fear, about what some people call love but looks very different in daylight. Sweat beaded on Frank's forehead despite the air conditioning. Mom's breathing became shallow. "I think you've had too much champagne, Princess. Maybe you should—" "I haven't had any champagne, Dad. I'm working." See, funny thing about being a detective, you develop instincts. You notice patterns. Financial control, isolation tactics, victim blaming. My voice carried clearly to surrounding groups. Just last week, I closed a case involving a successful businessman, pillar of the community. Everyone was shocked when the truth came out. Frank's complexion shifted from tanned to pale. "Emma, this really isn't the appropriate venue for—" "Oh, but it is. Because community leaders need to understand what domestic abuse looks like, how abusers use success, reputation, financial power to maintain control." I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out a manila folder. For example, medical records showing a pattern of injuries, financial records showing control tactics, witness statements from people who finally found courage to speak. The room grew quieter. Conversation stopped. Heads turned toward us. Frank reached for the folder. "What is this? What games are you playing?" "Not games, Dad. Evidence. See, the interesting thing about abusers, they always think they're smarter than everyone else. They think no one connects the dots. They think fear and shame will keep victims silent forever." "Emma, stop this right now!" Frank's voice rose. The mask started to slip. "Stop what, Dad?" "Telling the truth? You taught me about respect, authority, the proper order of things. Well, I learned about proper order. I learned that domestic violence crosses all social classes. I learned that successful men can be abusers too." I opened the folder, revealing hospital photos of Mom's injuries. Several guests gasped. Mom began crying. Financial records showing a weekly allowance of exactly $500. Marina fees for a yacht. Restaurant charges for 2 people on dates that don't match business trip schedules. Regular payments to Lisa Martinez. Frank lunged forward. "You ungrateful bitch! After everything I provided, this family, this house, your education?" There it was, the real Frank Morrison, in front of 500 witnesses. Security approached, not hotel security. Detective Johnson and Officer Martinez, badges visible. "Frank Morrison," Johnson announced, voice clear through the now silent ballroom. "You're under arrest for domestic battery and financial abuse." The sound of handcuffs clicking onto Frank's wrists echoed like gunshots. He struggled, face red with humiliation and rage. "This is bullshit. You can't do this. I know judges, I know commissioners. I own half this city." As they read Miranda rights and led him away, Frank screamed. "I built everything. I made all of you successful. Emma owes me everything she is." 500 people watched in complete silence as Miami's prominent developer got perp-walked out of his own success party. Then, something unexpected happened. Mom walked to the abandoned microphone, her hands steady for the first time in years. "My name is Maria Rodriguez Morrison," she said, voice clear and strong. "For 26 years, I was too ashamed to speak, too isolated, too afraid. Tonight, my daughter showed me what real strength looks like." Slow clapping started from the back of the room, then another. Soon, a standing ovation from 500 people who had just witnessed the most honest moment of their privileged lives. Mom looked at me, tears streaming, but smiling. Really smiling. My daughter taught me that family isn't blood. Family is who shows up when showing up costs them everything. Who chooses truth when lies are easier. Who fights when fighting is dangerous. As the applause continued, I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice, about speaking for those who can't speak, about using authority to protect, not control. Frank Morrison spent 34 years teaching me I wasn't good enough. Tonight, I showed him exactly how good I became. Not despite his teaching, but because of it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be, then using that power to protect others from people like them. The man who tried to make me feel small just got arrested at his biggest moment, in front of everyone who mattered in his world. But the real victory? Mom standing tall, speaking truth, taking back her voice. That's what justice sounds like. Like truth spoken clearly. Like handcuffs clicking. Like applause for courage. And sometimes, justice tastes like champagne you never had to drink. 6 months after that night at the Intercontinental Hotel, I sat in my office reading the Miami Herald with the headline, "Former Developer Frank Morrison Sentenced to 5 Years." A photo of him in orange Miami-Dade correctional uniform, handcuffed, face gray and hollow. No longer the successful businessman, just prisoner number 847392. I folded the newspaper, feeling like I was closing a book on a chapter of my life. Not the feeling of satisfaction or victory I'd expected, just quietness. Justice served doesn't always come with fireworks. The coffee on my desk was still hot, the familiar scent of a new morning routine. A routine without fear, without walking on eggshells, without wondering who would get hurt today. Detective Johnson knocked and entered with a stack of files. "Rodriguez, we got 3 new domestic violence cases, all high profile, all requesting you specifically." Word had gotten out. The detective who arrested her own father. The detective who chose justice over family loyalty. In police circles, I'd become something of a legend. In the domestic violence community, I'd become a symbol of hope. "Victims feel safer with you," Johnson continued. "They know you understand the cost of speaking truth." I took the files, glancing through them. 3 women, 3 different backgrounds. A CEO's wife, a senator's daughter, a judge's mother-in-law. All living behind perfect facades while being destroyed inside. "Set up the meetings," I said, "and make sure they know no one is too powerful to be held accountable." But Frank Morrison's downfall had spread further than the criminal justice system. The business empire he'd built on reputation and connections crumbled without him. Morrison Development Corporation filed bankruptcy. Contracts canceled. Assets seized. 26 years of success vanished in 6 months. Lisa Martinez had testified willingly, providing critical evidence about the pattern of financial manipulation and emotional abuse. In exchange, she received immunity and counseling resources. Last I heard, she'd moved back to Chicago, started fresh with family support. The business partners who used to pat Frank Morrison on the back at country club meetings now pretended they never knew him well. Funny how quickly respect evaporates when it's built on fear rather than integrity. But the real victory wasn't Frank's fall from grace. The real victory was Mom's rise from the ashes.
That evening, I drove to Mom's new apartment.
Not the big house she'd lived in for 26 years. A small, bright apartment overlooking Biscayne Bay. An apartment Mom chose herself, paid for with restitution money the court ordered Frank to provide. Mom answered the door wearing jeans and a soft yellow sweater. Hair shorter, more modern. Her smile genuine, reaching her eyes. The transformation was remarkable. Mija! Mom hugged me without flinching. No defensive posturing, no calculating whether it was safe to show affection. Come in, come in. I just finished painting. The living room was painted a warm coral color. Not white, not neutral. A color that spoke of joy, confidence, personal choice. On an easel by the window, a watercolor painting of sunrise over water. Mom had enrolled in art classes, something she'd wanted to do for decades, but Frank had dismissed as a waste of time. It's beautiful, Mom. I never knew I could create something beautiful, Mom said quietly. For so long, I only knew how to survive, how to make myself smaller, quieter, invisible. We sat on the couch, soft, comfortable furniture Mom picked out herself. Not the leather furniture Frank had chosen because real men prefer leather. Not the dark colors he'd demanded because they show sophistication. Bright fabrics with patterns that made Mom happy. How are the counseling sessions? I asked. Good. Hard, but good. Dr. Martinez helps me understand I wasn't weak. Surviving took strength. But now I'm learning a different kind of strength. Strength to choose, to speak, to take up space. Mom showed me a photo album she'd been working on. Pictures from before Frank. Pictures of her family in Mexico. Pictures of young Maria with dreams and laughter. Pictures that Frank had hidden away, claiming they looked unprofessional for business entertaining. I'm reclaiming my history, Mom explained. Not just surviving, but remembering who I was before fear. On the kitchen counter, an acceptance letter from Miami-Dade Community College. Mom had enrolled in business administration. I want to help other women, she said, voice steady and determined. Open a resource center. Show them they can rebuild, that leaving is possible, that they deserve better. This is what victory looks like. Not dramatic courtroom scenes or newspaper headlines. Quiet moments of choice, of dignity reclaimed, of futures imagined without fear. Emma, Mom said, taking my hands. That night at the hotel, I was so scared. Not of Frank being arrested, scared of finally being seen, of people knowing our secrets. And now I realize the shame belonged to him, not me. Secrets kept him powerful, made me small. Truth set us both free. Him to face consequences, me to build a real life. As I was leaving, Mom handed me a small wrapped package. For you, Mija. Inside, a silver bracelet with a single charm, badge-shaped, engraved with the words, "Justice served with love." I had it made, Mom explained, because you showed me. Justice isn't punishment. Justice is protection. Justice is saying, this stops here, with me, today. Justice is love refusing to be silent. Driving home, I thought about Frank Morrison in his cell tonight, wondering if he'd learned anything, if he understood the cost of his choices. Probably not. Abusers rarely accept responsibility, rarely change. But that wasn't my responsibility anymore. My responsibility was to ensure other victims knew there is a way out. There is support. There is life after abuse. My phone buzzed with a text from a colleague. Fourth domestic violence case today requesting you specifically. Word is spreading, I smiled. Frank Morrison spent 34 years teaching me I wasn't good enough to matter. Tonight, his legacy was ensuring that I mattered more than he ever imagined. Sometimes revenge isn't fire consuming everything in its path. Sometimes revenge is simply living better, freer, and more purposefully than anyone expected you to. Sometimes revenge is becoming exactly what they said you couldn't be, then using that power to light the way for others walking out of darkness. Frank Morrison tried to make me smaller. Instead, he made me unstoppable. And tonight, 4 more women would have hope that their voices mattered, that their safety mattered, that their future could be different from their past. That's a payoff worth more than any courtroom drama, worth more than any newspaper headline. That's justice that lasts. 1 year later, I sat in my new office with my new title, Supervisor, Domestic Violence Unit. On the wall, dozens of thank you letters from survivors, certificates from community organizations, an award from the governor for outstanding service. But those achievements weren't what made me proudest. What made me proudest was the text I received yesterday from a girl named Sarah. Detective Rodriguez, 3 months ago I called the hotline. Today I moved out and started a new job. I want to thank you for showing me that no one deserves to be treated badly. That's exactly why I'm sharing this story with you. If you've stayed with me this far, it means you understand that sometimes the people supposed to protect us are the ones who hurt us most. Sometimes family isn't safe. Sometimes love and fear get confused with each other. I want you to remember 3 things. First, family isn't blood. Family is the people who show up when showing up costs them something. Family is people who choose truth over comfort, justice over silence. If someone who supposedly loves you makes you afraid, that's not love, that's control. Second, your voice matters. My mother stayed silent for 26 years because she was afraid no one would believe her. But when she finally spoke the truth, 500 people stood and applauded. Sometimes people are just waiting for someone to have the courage to speak first. Third, you deserve better. It doesn't matter how successful they are, how respected they are, or how powerful they are. No one has the right to make you feel scared in your own home. No one has the right to control your life through fear, money, or manipulation. Real strength isn't making people afraid of you. Real strength is protecting those who can't protect themselves. Real love doesn't demand silence. Real love encourages your voice, supports your dreams, celebrates your success. My mother now runs a support center for domestic violence survivors. Every week, she helps dozens of women find the courage to speak, resources to leave, and hope to rebuild. The woman who was once too scared to answer the phone is now giving others strength to change their lives. If this story sounds familiar, if someone in your life needs to hear this, please share it. Sometimes one story can change everything. Sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step toward freedom. And if you're currently in a situation where you feel scared, controlled, or unsafe, please remember, help is available. Support exists. A future different from your past is possible. You deserve love that feels like safety. You deserve family that feels like freedom. You deserve respect that doesn't come with fear attached. I'm Detective Emma Rodriguez, and if I can find courage to stand up in a ballroom with 500 people watching, you can find courage in your situation too. Sometimes the best revenge isn't fire. Sometimes it's simply refusing to stay small, refusing to stay silent, and choosing truth even when truth is scary. Your story matters. Your voice matters. You matter. Never forget that.